Well, today we played some 25 NL Zone. We won some money, definitely, but it wasn't the best session I've ever played. See if you can spot everything I did wrong. I challenge you. Seriously, I mean it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Exceptional Poker Video. Today it's just going to be a short 20-minute session or so. We're going to play some 25 NL Zone. I got a request from a reader to do more of the bigger micro stakes, if you will. Been doing some 5 and 10 NL stuff, and this particular reader said, "Hey, that's great, but would like to see stuff at 25 and 50 NL." If possible. So we're going to play a little bit of 25 just to see how it goes. Hope you guys are all doing well. For me, it's if you're watching this on the day it comes out, this is a Friday, and summer is here in southern Arizona. We had a cold snap this week. It was actually down to 66 as a high earlier this week, which is crazy for middle of May, but we're back up to where we belong, which is in the mid 90s. So a little bit rough. I got a swimming pool, so it's not too bad. It's one of the requirements for me living in southern Arizona is that we have a pool. So that's good. So we flop middle pair here, pretty dry board. You know, there's some connectivity here with, Jack 10 kind of hands that people have. We block a few of those with this 10. I'm not going to go away for one street. I'm going to call one street at least here. I don't think raising is going to accomplish much. I don't think we're going to get a guy to fold a worse hand. We picked up some equity here. I don't think we're going to get a guy to call with worse hands. Or fold better hands. So, straights just got there. So it's the flush equity that's really driving us here. So, we whiffed on this flop, that's life. Maybe could have played a little bit more aggressively, but we're done. We're not going to get fancy. 25 NL, you're going to see a little bit more aggression than you do at the $5 tables. You're going to see a little bit better play. They're still not great players, so you should be able to beat these games pretty soundly for, between 4 and 8, 9, 10 big blinds per 100, something like that. You should be able to do if you're playing relatively straightforward. If you're playing a positionally tight game, play tight in early position is what I'm trying to say. A little bit looser in late position, play aggressively for the most part, unlike I just did there, which is probably a mistake. I gotta go back and think about that hand. And just as importantly as everything else, don't pay people off. If they're betting 3 streets into you and you don't have the near nuts, you're done. Okay, so again we flop middle pair, ace high. This is a limped board. It's hard to put people on aces here. Imagine you're in the 6th seat, for example, and you've got, ace 10 or so. Are you limping that hand there? No, you're probably raising it. So it's if we were heads up against this number 6 seat, I'm probably going to call and peel a street. But the fact that this guy called, it is more likely now that he's got a very weak ace. So gonna let it go. So the secrets to winning at these stakes are position. Play relatively aggressively, unlike I'm doing so far. And then, not paying people off. Making simple reads. You don't have to overly complicate things. But you do have to make some kind of reads, like I did there, where you're saying, okay, does this guy have an ace? What kind of aces would he limp open that hand with? And it's hard to put him on any ace. Now, that small blind in that particular case could have had something like ace deuce, and the fact that he's not going away when he's bet into their multi-way leads me to believe he might have easily had an ace. So, we're just giving up there. I heard something the other day that was pretty interesting. It was a quote, and I can't remember who said it. But the quote was, it's not the bet you have to fear. It's the person calling that bet. So here somebody led into that board, that ace high board, and then somebody called multi-way, meaning he's not afraid of the ace, meaning he's got an ace probably. So think in terms of that. It's the person calling those kind of bets and raises is the one that you really got to pay attention to. So anyway, I hope you guys are having a good week. It's, as I said, it's hot here. It's been a rough week for me. I had lost a friend this week, a coworker who's went out on sick leave. Okay, this guy raised an early position, our ace jack. This is one of those really tough ones. I'm going to go ahead and raise it up, re-raise here. Try to take initiative in the hand. If I get re-raised, it's an easy fold. If he calls, I'm going to be playing in position with a hand that blocks a lot of aces. And if he folds, I'm pretty happy with that too. So we're just going to play that way. He called queen high, pretty quick check to us, so I'm going to go ahead and c-bet here. Pretty standard. A little bit of a wet board, 2 diamonds on there, and the 8 and the queen are somewhat connected. You got to be a little bit careful there, but that's a pretty easy board to c-bet into. Anyway, I lost a friend, coworker this week. Went out and saw him actually the day before he died. He had a very painful, difficult type of cancer he was dealing with, and just was completely bedridden, and it was a pretty sad week. In a strange way, I'm happy he passed away that same night that I saw him, because he was suffering, and nobody deserves to suffer like that. Okay, here we got an under the gun raise, a cold caller here. We're going to be out of position. So unlike that ace jack where we were going to probably have position here, this is a fold. It's not a re-raise. And you got to remember why you're raising. Remember, you're raising to get worse hands to call and better hands to fold. And let's look at the range of that guy under the gun who open raised and the guy next to him who called. It's unlikely that a re-raise of ours is going to accomplish either one of those things. So it's best just to let it go. Going to raise the king 8 off here. It folded to us. This is in our range of opening here. Pretty easy. Obviously a steal. We're raising as a bluff. King gives us a little bit of equity, so we're gonna bet there. Okay, good situation. We get raised under the gun. We're not going to screw around. I'm not a believer in slow playing aces almost ever. So we're going to re-raise here. If the guy folds, so be it. If he wants to jam on us, fantastic. We're not going to screw around. We're going to just keep betting here for value. We're going to hope he comes along with king jack or kings or a club draw, or, well, we hope he doesn't come along with a club draw. But most likely he's got, a pair or something like that. So we're betting for value here. Jams on us. We're in a little bit of a tough spot there, but that's a pretty easy value bet there. So anyway, as I said, lost a friend this week. And then I've got a family member who is also in the late stages of life, and is struggling on a number of fronts. Some mental confusion is kicking in, and there's a lot of physical ailments and things like that. And so I'm spending some time with them, helping take them to doctor's appointments and things like that. And I have to confess, I'm not wired for that sort of thing. I could never be a caregiver like that. It's just really tough for me to have that kind of patience. I'm forcing myself to, because I love this person very much, and I don't want to see them suffer, and I want to help them out. But boy, it's tough. So life, man, life can be pretty hard at times. So, but we all go through it. It's not something that any single one of us is necessarily alone in. Okay, so this is a late position min open. This is a 3-bet here. primarily as a re-steal. I can't put him on a very strong hand unless he comes along or goes over the top. We had top pair here. I'm going to fire again for value. Hope he's going to come along with his pair of nines or something, or eights, if that's what he opened with there. So I don't like the king, but again, I got a two barrel here, which is I'm going to go ahead and fire again. If he comes over the top here, we are definitely done with this hand. Okay, I think I got to keep repping an ace here. If he calls or jams on us, he's definitely got an ace. But so that's a three barrel. I think he had something like a pair of nines or a pair of jacks or something like that, and just didn't believe us. So that's okay. Sometimes you got a triple barrel. That ace is actually kind of a good card for us there on the end, because our re-raise pre-flop, we have lots of aces in our range, and so when that ace hits, he's got to be afraid of us. Anyway, life goes on, life and death. So a little bit morbid. What else is going on? Got some good news. Sky Matsuhashi over on Smart Poker Study contacted me a little while ago. Okay, we got a gut shot here to the 9. I think I'm going to fire because this got checked around on the flop here, so I'm going to go ahead and fire. So he's getting sticky here, the number 2 seat. Hey, and we hit our miracle card. I think I'm going to bet a little bit big because I think he's. I thought he was, hit that 7 and was not going to believe us there, but that's okay. Anyway, Sky over there, Sky Matsuhashi puts on a great podcast. If you guys get a chance, if you're at all into podcasts, I really recommend you listen to his weekly podcast, Smart Poker Study. I really like it. I think I like his format. I like his style. Real smart poker player, obviously. And I like how he distills things down to really easy to digest concepts. I'm a pretty good poker player, I feel, and good enough that I obviously coach and feel I'm good enough to coach and things like that. But I frequently pick up stuff from Sky that it's like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at something. Happened again this week. He was talking about equity, hot and cold equity, and his concept of what he calls bread and butter hands. And anyway, it was a good podcast today. And I actually stopped the car at one point. I was listening to it on the way home from work, stopped the car, pulled over, and jotted down some of the notes, some of the stuff that he made me think about. Okay, we got re-raised here. Tricky to, 3 betting here is absolutely fine. I think the issue that I've got is we're going to be out of position, and I think I'm just going to call here. And I'm going to check to the razor. We flop top pair. The only hand we're really afraid of here is aces. We block kings, of course. So the question is, do I bet or do I bet and let him bluff? I think I'm going to bet and let him bluff into us. With his ace queen, kind of a hand, and I think I'm just going to peel here and just call. And so, it's. I don't think he was going to call a bet there on the river if we bet there. So I think checking to him and letting him fire and turn his hand into a bluff is probably the best thing to do. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent again here because the hand occurred. So, anyways, I like Sky's podcast. Anyway, long story short, he approached me a few weeks ago and said, "Hey, Mark, you want to team up and do a webinar on math?" He puts on webinars every now and then, and I jumped at the chance. It's a real privilege and an honor to do something with him, and so we noodled out an agenda and sort of a list of topics we wanted to cover. It's coming up at the end of this month, May 27th. I think it's going to be, there's an early bird price that's going on. It's pretty inexpensive. I don't know. I forget the exact price. But it's like, I think the early bird price was $35 if you get in by within a week. And he does these, and then you have lifetime access to it. You can always go back and watch the replays and things like that. So anyway, he contacted me and said, hey, let's team up, let's do one of these. And I jumped at it. So it's on math, and which I've always felt I'm pretty strong at. But like all things, when you have to teach something to someone else in the form of a webinar or coaching, you always got to go bone up on it and really, make sure you know it. And so I've been doing that, polishing my math skills and starting to put together a presentation. This Jack-9 suited, it's a little bit loosey-goosey here in these first two seats to open, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. We got re-raised. If he was full stacked here, I'd be more inclined to call, but I'm just going to let it go. Implied odds just aren't there to make that call, so I'm going to let it go. So we divvied up the topics we're going to cover, and kind of looking forward to it. It's started putting my slides together. I'm going to talk about edges in poker. I'm covering the 2-4 rule and outs, that sort of thing. Covering the concept of hand domination and how you do some simple probability calculations, that sort of thing. Yeah, just stuff like that. We're trying to keep it both kind of high-level stuff of interest, but mostly focus on things that really will make a difference to you on the table. Okay, we got an open of 75 cents here. I've got a pretty strong hand here, so I'm going to re-raise for value. He could have ace-9 here really easily, for example, in our hand. We've got equity against that. So we're going to go on a bet. Very dry board, really hard to put him on a 5. So we're going to go ahead and fire for value here and hope he comes along with 8s or something like that, 7s, 6s. So that's why we're betting here. And then Sky's going to cover things like break-even percentage calculations and those kind of things that are really useful when you're stealing or calling as well. So it's going to be a good little hour and a half webinar followed by Q&A with whoever attends. There's going to be a number of giveaways that we're including, some odds and outs charts, and I put together a little spreadsheet calculator we're going to give away. Which is kind of fun to play with. Just a number of things like that. My pot and fold equity grid that you guys might have seen on the blog a while ago that I use for c-bet determination and betting determination. I'm including that spreadsheet basically. So if you want to play around with bet sizing and pot sizing and see how fold equity and pot equities expected value of those things change with a function of pot and fold equity. You'll get that as part of the webinar. So some really good stuff. And like I say, Sky's a pretty sharp cookie. Okay, we're going to go ahead and bet the kings here, obviously, for values. This is one where a lot of people are tempted to slow play. Just don't do it. If everybody folds, then they were destined to fold anyway. You want to get money into the pot when you think you're ahead. Now, we're multi-way and there's an ace on the board, so that you've got to be a little bit nervous. The fact that we didn't get re-raised discounts the chance that they have aces there. Now, the fact that he did call, so I'm going to check back the turn and then we'll bet again on the river and or call. Ooh, he's betting pretty big into here. I think we're beat. So if you think you're beat, fold is the thing I like to teach. So I'm going to listen to my own advice there. A little painful to fold kings, but you got to be willing to fold them. They're just a pair. Yeah, they're a pretty strong pair, but when there's an ace on the board and you're getting fired into, you got to let it go. Now, the fact that I checked back the turn might have given him license to bluff into us on the river there. So I'm going to go back definitely and replay that hand and rework the math a little bit in my head and see if it made sense or not. Might have misplayed that one. I'd like your thoughts on that. If you've got some comments or thoughts on that, leave it below. I'd appreciate it. So, working on slides, working on the presentation, which is coming up in a few weeks. I've got some travel coming up. I got to be. It's going to cut into a lot of my time, but that's the nature of my business. Okay, we bet when there's a steal. Got 2 calls. Again, hard to put people on aces when they just call here, But when they do fire into you, just let it go. You know, we've got no equity on this board, so this is an easy fold. If you check to us, that's an easy c-bet, might seem a little paradoxical. But again, you've got to put your opponents on hand ranges and think in terms of what are they calling with here? What are they firing into? How many opponents are they firing into? And how does that affect their the range we put them on? You know, if there's 4 players in a hand and somebody early in that situation is betting on an ace-high board into 3 other opponents, unless they're just an incredibly terrible player, they have to be aware that there's lots of other players that still act, that there's an ace out there, that, you know, there's reasons to be afraid, and yet they're betting. So you have to assume they're not afraid, which means that they've got an ace, or, you know, whatever hand they have is not afraid of that ace. So you've got to constantly think in terms of that. If you want to progress beyond really 5 or 10 NL poker and get up into 25 or 50 or certainly anything higher than that, you absolutely have to learn how to hand read. And you don't have to overly complicate things. You can start very simply with just saying, okay, what kind of hands would I open in the seat that my opponent opened his hand in? He's in early position. And so the types of hands I open in that seat for that amount of money are X, Y, and Z. You start there, and then as you play more and more with that player, now I know we're at a zone table, so you're not really playing against the same opponents hand to hand. But you know, at a regular table, if you're doing that, you start to adjust that range you put them on and start to tweak it and adjust it and say, okay, well, this person's a crazy player. I'm going to go ahead and c-bet again here. Fire a second barrel. Pretty dry board. Super hard for him to continue without something, you know, 2 pair or better kind of hands. So that's a pretty easy second barrel. In that particular case, I think that he just assumed that board didn't hit us and he didn't believe us. So that's why you have to be willing to fire that second barrel. So you start easy with hand reading. Don't overly complicate it and get into all this, you know, 13 by 13 grids and, you know, this guy plays 18% of hands and this guy plays 22, and what's that difference? And, you know, there is absolutely a time and a place for that as you move up in stakes and as you get better and able to do more and more of those kind of hand reading. But start simple. There's no reason to overly complicate things, especially at the lower stakes, these micro stakes games. No sense complicating your life. Because your opponents aren't that great. And okay, so definitely deep enough here. It's going to cost us 50 cents to make this call. Yes, we're going to be out of position, but we're set mining here. You know, we're trying to hit a deuce. We didn't hit it. We're check folding here if he bets into us again. So pretty easy play here. He's more than deep enough for that 50-cent call to be profitable for us, even though we're out of position. So in other news, that's really about it. It's Mother's Day weekend, so we're going to do some of that kind of stuff. Going to spend a little time with the mother-in-law, and then my wife. We're going to do the typical stuff on Sunday with her. Do a meal, probably go out for a motorcycle ride, which she's really enjoying and keeps asking to do on the weekend, so that's what we've been doing. Go out for a meal, that kind of stuff. So, you know, just the typical Mother's Day goof around weekend, which should be good. So poker's going pretty well. I'm struggling a little bit at PLO. Those of you that have subscribed to my email list on the blog, you get my updates on a, you know, every other weekish basis, roughly. Every 2 to 3 weeks, I send out an email with additional poker information, some links I think would be useful for poker, you know, players learning, all that kind of stuff. But I also include a link to my results. In the spirit of openness and full transparency, I always post I keep a running. It's a Google Sheets actually, like it's a spreadsheet with charts on it that show my cash game results, my PLO results, and then my relatively infrequent sit and go and tournament results as well. And not unexpectedly, my No Limit Texas Hold'em results are usually pretty good. I average $45-ish an hour at the stakes I normally play. My PLO results, as you'll see if you see that sheet and look at the results, are not quite as good. I'm still profitable at PLO, but there's definitely a lot more variance, and there's a lot more periods of long, extended losing or break-even periods, and I seem to be in one of those stretches right now. It's been the bankroll, the PLO bankroll hasn't grown much at all in the past month and a half-ish easily. I seem to just be fluctuating up and down. Still averaging about $13 an hour on average in there, but I'm in a lull. And I credit that to two things. I credit it in part to just the nature of the game, the variance of Pot Limit Omaha. It's not a game for the weak of mind and stomach. It's a roller coaster ride for sure. And so that's just inherent in the game. But I also credit it to the fact that I'm by no means a Pot Limit Omaha expert. I know enough to be somewhat profitable, but I am, unlike Hold'em, I'm just not, quote unquote, crushing the game by any manner of means. And there's a lot of situations I get into in Pot Limit Omaha where I'm like, I really don't know where I'm at in this hand, so I'm giving up. And I think I'm giving up some value there. As I said earlier, if you don't know where you're at in the hand, you should fold, like we did earlier in the earlier hand here in this session. In Pot Limit Omaha, it's the same, absolutely, but I think a better player would know a lot more accurately where he's at and wouldn't have to give up in those situations that I find myself having to fold in a lot. Pot Limit Omaha also is a game, and I know that the experts are going to disagree with me, and rightly so. They clearly know more about it than me, but I treat it as a game. You'll often hear about Pot Limit Omaha or PLO as a game of the nuts, meaning if you don't have the nuts or the near nuts, you probably have the losing hand, and you're going to have to win either by forcing the other guy out, which is really hard, or you should just fold. And so I treat the game like that, and that's a mistake, I think, in the long run. Remember, there's two ways to win at poker. You can show down the best hand, or you can get everybody else to fold. And when I play No Limit Hold'em, I'm absolutely employing both of those in a very judicious manner, obviously, but I'm using both ways to win. And I think one of the leaks in my PLO game is that I'm relying too much on hand strength and trying to make hands. And I think in part that's because I am afraid of the nuts. I think of it as a game of the nuts, and I need to get better at hand reading in PLO. So we're going to go ahead and fire here again. I don't like that jack on the board. The sevens, though, tough for this guy to continue a little bit here. So I'm going to fire a second barrel. If he re-raises us, we're done. A lot of times you're going to have to fire two barrels on a board like that because the opponents know that that hand, that those three cards did not hit your hand in a lot of cases. The players are good enough now at even the $25 tables to understand that level of understanding board texture. So, but again, when I'm playing PLO, my idea of board texture is what's the nuts and do I have it? I don't. What's the likelihood this guy has the nuts? I don't know. I'm quitting to aggression here. And again, folding is, if you don't know where you're at in a poker hand. I was raising there. I got re-raised. I've got a really weak queen, so I got to give up. If you don't know where you're at in a poker hand, get the heck out of the hand. Get out of there. Don't guess. Don't make this a guessing game. Poker is a gambling game, meaning it's all about expected value and probabilities. But it's not a guessing game. You don't spend your time guessing. If you don't know where you're at and can't put your opponents on on hand ranges, you shouldn't necessarily be in that hand, which, as I say, I realize probably excludes me from playing Pot Limit Omaha because I'm not a good hand reader at PLO. But again, it goes back to the idea of don't overly complicate poker. If you think you're beat or don't know where you're at, quit. Get out of the hand. Okay, here now folding is way too weak. We're getting 6-1 on our money. So calling or re-raising are both acceptable. I'm going to re-raise because I just never believe these 50-cent opens on the button. Not a great board for us to. I'm just going to check. Way too likely somebody's. This is a pretty wet board. Jacks and nines and those kind of cards. We've got. That queen is easily somebody can have a queen. If we're heads up, I'm for sure c-betting there, but multi-way, just give up. Again, don't overcomplicate your life. I lost nothing by giving up in that hand. The money that was in the pot wasn't mine anymore. It just was a sunk cost. Whatever portion of that I had put into the pot is a sunk cost and no longer mine. So it cost me nothing, zero, nothing. I'm going to call here. Re-raising is probably a better play because this limp. So we've got a flush draw, pretty weak flush draw on a paired board. We're not going to get a ton of money in here, but we are probably going to semi-bluff if it checks to us. I'm just going to call here. There's no reason not to. No, we hate that. But he might hate it too. So we're going to go ahead and c-bet here. He can't continue unless he's got a pair. So keep things simple, people. Folding is 0 EV. Costs you nothing. So fold. If you don't know where you're at, don't overly complicate your life and put money at risk. Just fold. King 7 off. We're going to fold to that raise. And I'm going to go ahead and sit out the next big blind. So we'll just play a few more hands and then call it quits. So I hope you guys have a good Mother's Day weekend if you're watching this kind of in real time as I post it. And if not, I hope in general you're having a good time and that the cards are treating you well, that you're having some profit on the felt. If you're not, drop me an email. Always try to answer emails in a timely fashion. If you got questions about hands you played or things you're struggling with, drop me an email, mark@exceptionalpoker.com. Going to raise the 8-6 suited here, late position. So you got a question, struggling with something, concept is confusing you, something I did in this particular session confuses you, which it could because I didn't play all of these hands really perfectly. If you're a break-even player and trying to become a winning player, or you're a losing player trying to even get up to break-even status, I can probably help. So drop me a line, mark@exceptionalpoker.com. I welcome emails. I'm going to let this go. I'm basically shutting down. And so that's it. So anyway, I hope you guys appreciated this session. It's a short one, profitable, but that's almost beside the point. How well did we play? Could have played better, I think. I'm going to go back and review some of those hands. Made the kind of one of those fundamental mistakes. I just jumped into this game, clicked the screen record, and started recording it. Didn't do what I should have done and what I do at my normal stakes, and that is do my pregame preparation, kind of center myself. I've got a pre-flight, what I call a pre-flight checklist, a pregame checklist I walk through and remind myself of aggression, playing position. I've got, half a dozen things on that list that I always have to remind myself of just to put myself back in the right frame of mind. So that's that was a mistake to begin this session. And then, like I said, a couple of these hands I'm not so sure about. I'll go back and review it. And, you should be doing the same. You should absolutely be reviewing your sessions on a regular basis, looking for leaks, looking for things that you've done wrong. I mean, actively going out and trying to find holes in your game. if you're not doing that, you're missing a huge part of poker improvement. And trust me, enough of your opponents are doing those off-table things, those studying of, reading poker books and reviewing their hand sessions and plugging leaks and joining mastermind groups and talking over hands and posting hands in forums and all of that stuff, not to mention the pregame warm-ups, the post-game session logging and reviews, the journaling, all of that stuff. If you're not doing that, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage to the players that are doing that. So keep that in mind. Poker is a game that's constantly evolving. Your opponents are working on their game. At the micro stakes, maybe a third of them are, but those third are taking your chips. So your job is to get better than them and to take their chips, as well as to take all the chips of everybody else as well. So anyway, thanks again for joining us. I hope this was helpful. Drop me a line if you want to see something else. You want to see another session played, something interesting that I haven't been doing, maybe some PLO. Ask for some PLO and I'll play some. And you can laugh along with me at just how non-expert I am. So thanks again, and I'll talk to you later. Cheers.